And here she comes down the stairs to the basement. Radhia Gleis is here. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, Joe. How are you?
Well, I'm great, and I have to tell you, reading your book, Radhia, I am fascinated by your life. There were so many unexpected twists and turns, including, by the way, a stint where you worked in the 1984 Olympics.
I was a mounted marshal in the 1984 Olympics. Yeah, and I was also a steeplechase champion. So,
That
you know, my first race that I won was at Pebble Beach. Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
unbelievable. And what a beautiful place that is, too.
Gorgeous.
Well, and that's just a hint about the very conversation we're going to have with you today. But you know, a lot of people think that people that spend time in a cult, that they were duped, that they are somehow dumb to fall for it. Yet we see when it comes to these personalities out there, Radhia, that's never the case. And certainly the people that you were surrounded by,
Right.
the 22 years that you were involved in a cult, were a lot of very smart people.
You know, that's funny, Joe, because I've been interviewed a lot, and it's like people go, after they talk to me for a while, you know, or if they've read my book, they go, you know, it's, wow, Radhia, you're so intelligent, you know, and I'm thinking, that's sort of like, I don't know, thanks, you know, it's like, oh, you look so good since you lost all that weight. I don't know if it's, you know, so they're really expecting some gullible, you know, moron. And that's kind of why I wrote the book, Joe, because, you know, I want to sort of explain the title, The Followers Holy Hell, and the Disciple of Narcissistic Leaders. Holy Hell is in reference to the documentary. And the documentary was released in 2016, and I'm in the documentary. And I encourage people to see the documentary and then read the book, because it's real archival footage, you know, of us in our natural habitat. So, you know, you can kind of get an idea as you're reading. You've got visuals, but the thing about the documentary is, you know, you cannot tell a 30-year story in 100 minutes. And so, you know, when I did,
You said, by the way, you were interviewed, not to cut you off, but Will, the documentarian, who is also involved, you say that he interviewed you for, what, 4 days? And really,
No.
you know, or he interviewed you for a long time and had to cut it to just a little tiny smidgen of that.
Yeah, so he interviewed me for about 4.5 hours of actual
4.5 hours.
filming. Yeah, 4 days, 4.5 hours. It seemed like.
Felt like 4 days.
Right, yeah. So yeah, you know, he had 30 years of archival footage. He had about 45 hours of footage that he had to edit down to 100 minutes and tell a story, which I think he did a beautiful job. And, you know, he had to portray a story arc. And so you'll see me when I'm 29 years old, you know, and I'm 68 now. So, you know, it was a long road. And so he had to take all of that footage and tell the progression. And so when people see the film, because he gets to the end really quick in 100 minutes, people look at it and go, oh, I'd never fall for that. You know, it's like, yeah, sure. So one of the reasons why I wrote the book is because it doesn't happen like that. I know you can look at that and go, oh, he's so ugly and he's so whatever, and I'd never let him do that to me. Well, you have to understand it's like a frog in warm water. You know, it took 20 years for that to unravel, and the filmmaker just had to put it all in 100 minutes. So when I was writing the book, I wanted people to really understand what they think they're seeing in the film. And number two, people in the Q&A, they would say to me, you know, like, well, in the beginning, you know, I would join that group. And then others would say, I would never be that gullible. I would never be that stupid. And so I wanted to write this book to think that if you think that you would not fall for that? Just depends on what it is and where it is. And I've mentioned in interviews before, do you think that all of the investors and the lawyers who were involved in Bernie Madoff were stupid or gullible? And that is the thing that I want people to understand. It can happen to anyone. It just depends on what you want. So for me, it was spiritual enlightenment. For others, it's great wealth. So if a narcissistic sociopath can figure out what you want, they're like chameleons. They will be whatever you want or need them to be, and they're really good at it.
Well,
So they'll figure you out.
Yeah, let's dive into what you were searching for, because I think that this is a great parallel path to a lot of people, to your point, that are searching for certain things from financial leaders and end up getting conned and can't believe that they, quote, fell for it when to your point, the person is so good at manipulating what you're hoping for. But for you, you had this great upper class. Well, a lot of people consider it great upper class upbringing. And I love that you telling the story of your dad and your mom. And in that house, in their house, your dad had learned really to stuff his feelings away. And you said when your mom cried was really the one time you saw him show a lot of feeling, but beside that, not much. But at a young age, you, because of your household, learned how to mix drinks when you were a kid, and you really didn't have. It really wasn't, Radhia, this warm. It was a loving household, I think, but it really wasn't this warm place.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone has ever seen, the series Mad Men, remember that series?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
If you've ever seen that, that was my life. Growing up in the 50s and 60s in Los Angeles, my father he was one of the 12 super lawyers in Los Angeles, and he was a lawyer to the Hollywood and Los Angeles elite. And so both of my parents were stunningly attractive, very, very good looking, very charismatic themselves, somewhat narcissistic themselves, and I refer to, we were not the middle class and we weren't the super rich. We were like the entrepreneur class. But we hung out with the super rich. I went to private school, and I'm not going to say who I went to school with, but you would recognize the names, let's put it that way. And, so I was in the households of the super rich my whole life. And that was kind of one of the things that at a really early age, and you say, like in Mad Men, in those days in the 50s and 60s, you had children because you had to have them. It's like if you didn't have children, there was something wrong with you.
You were checking the box.
Check the box.
Yeah.
Right? And so in a way, we were like the furniture, we were designer family, and we were on the surface really attractive and really, dynamic and, all of this stuff. And behind closed doors, as I say in my book, all that glitters is not gold. So I was talking to somebody the other day about this because they were interested in my life and my past. Many people go for my life as a goal, They think, if they're not in an affluent situation, they think that is the pinnacle of life. That is what I'm striving for, is to live in Brentwood, right? Right next door, let's see, Gregory Peck was down the street and O.J. Simpson was on the next block, And people have this idea that, that is what I want to strive for, that kind of life. I had the interesting perspective of being there and wanting to get out of there because I saw that there was no real happiness. A lot of it was pretense. And so I was looking for something greater than that, something higher than that.
Yeah, you had a couple things because your parents were I love that phrase, the entrepreneur class. You didn't spend a lot of time with them because if they weren't out hustling, they weren't making any money. So
No,
they were
no,
entertaining, doing other things. So you're looking for this warmth and you find it, you think, in the Catholic Church. And growing up Catholic, you find now
right,
you have wonderful smells. You have rote, mass is the same every Sunday. About 85% of it, maybe 90% of it's the same. Like I could
right.
see you being very attracted to Catholicism because of the fact that you got this definite warm spiritual feeling.
Sure. I will say this that, to the Catholics, they have something called the age of reason. And the age of reason is 7. And that's when a Catholic child, that's when they do their first Holy Communion, is when they reach the age of reason. I left Catholicism at the age of reason, the age 7. It was not reasonable to me, however, or at least the dogma was not reasonable. But the world was, and I was enamored with the saints, and in Catholicism, I was reading some history which was really interesting about the Romans and pantheism. And the saints were sort of the Catholics' way of having a pantheistic kind of reality to get along with the Romans, back then. So the saints became sort of demigods because, there's beautiful statues and these beautiful paintings of all these saints, and you learn about their stories of martyrdom and all of that. And so I wanted to be a saint. Not, oh, look at me, aren't I a good person? But I wanted that transcendental experience that they were apparently experiencing. I wanted that direct communion with God, and not through a wafer,
Yeah.
but through a real transcendental experience. And so that's what kind of inspired me to look for that. By the time I got in ninth grade, I was a freshman in high school. To the school's credit, they were teaching comparative religions. So they were teaching Buddhism and Hinduism and all the isms. And there was this word in Hinduism called nirvana. And I asked the teacher, what does that mean? And he said, well, some yogis in India experience God directly through meditation. And I'm like, is that true? And he
I
goes, well,
can,
apparently. I'm thinking,
by the way,
what are
Radia,
you doing?
when I was reading that, he just kind of says that just kind of off the cuff while they experience God directly. I can I
Right.
can I can hear your head spinning around in the book pages. Like you're like, "What?
Right.
How do I get me some of that?" Like, please.
Right. And I'm thinking this dude calls himself a theologian, right? And he knows of people who actually have this experience, but he's not interested in going and finding out more. It's like, okay. So I set out from the time I was 14 and, growing up in LA in the 60s and 70s, there was a lot of drugs, sex, and rock and roll, did all of that, did psychedelics, did all kinds of stuff in search for that, and it took me about, I was on that journey for about another 12 years before I found somebody who said, yes, I have those meditation techniques. And that's how the whole story goes. That's how it starts.
Well, and let me ask you about that person. You make your way to Miami, which is a fascinating story. We're not going to get to tell, but when you're in Miami, you get introduced to a woman named Malalia. And
Malila.
Malila? Oh,
Malila.
I got that. I
Yeah.
got that wrong. Yeah,
Yeah.
but can you tell me about that first meeting when you go see Malila and there's one empty chair and
Yeah. Well, I don't want to give too much away, but that is one of my funnier chapters. Um, okay, so I'm sitting there, and I've done all kinds of things in the searching, and I finally meet this guy and I'm expounding on life, liberty, and the pursuit of God. And he says, you need to go meet Malila. And I'm like, who? And it's this wonderful woman down in South Miami. And she gives what's called satsang, which is it means sharing of truth in India. or in India, Hindu. And so I go to this little house and I'm late. And, there's shoes all strewn out on the front porch. So I get the hint and I quietly open the door and the whole room is it's packed with people. And this is in the, 70s. People are wearing Nehru, shirts and their mala beads and stuff like that. They're all kind of sitting around on the floor or on the couch or whatever. And there were no chairs, no place else to sit, except for there was this little, straw kind of chair in the corner. So I sat in it, and that was Malila's chair. And so everybody screamed at me, like, that's Malila's chair. And that's kind of like, walking into the classroom and sitting at the big desk in the, in the front of the class. So, yeah, I sat in the guru's chair. First spiritual faux pas, never sit in the guru's chair.
I thought you were going to take over the place on day one, Radhia. Just take over it, you own it. Yeah. There was this rejection. She rejected you. You were looking for the spiritual enlightenment. You were on your way to a meeting, and she said that you weren't ready. And I was wondering about this early rejection from this group that later on that you would get deeply involved in a different kind of with a different guy, but a very similar group. Why do you think that she rejected you early on? Is that part of was a takeaway a part of the process? Like they take it away so you want it more? Was it a sales pitch or was that more, were they really rejecting you?
I think so. I mean, first of all, I met Jaime, the guru that I ended up with for many years, because he was a friend of Malila's, and that Malila introduced me to him. Because I moved back to LA and so did he. So that's that connection. But yeah, in hindsight, there's this game, I think, that they play. And it is sort of a dangling carrot. And there is sort of a cat and mouse kind of thing where they want to, I feel that they want to see how they can subjugate you, how they can have control over you. So the goal is the 4 techniques. And so they give this initiation of this 4 techniques, and they kind of prepare you. That's what it's all about. They prepare you for months and months where you come to satsang and you learn selfless service and you learn to be humble and you learn all of these things in hopes that you will finally be initiated into these 4 techniques. So that particular night in question you're talking about, she was having a knowing session. And I went and she opened the door and said, "What do you want?" I mean, like, what do you mean, what do I want? This is like the night.
Yeah, you know what I want.
Like, I'm selling Girl Scout cookies. What the hell do you think, So I said, I want to know God. And she said, "You're not ready." Slam the door. And I'm like, no, wait. I have been on this journey since I was 14. Like, what do you mean I'm not ready? And who are these yokels in there that you're about to initiate? And why are they ready and I'm not? And I think part of the thing was my personality. I'm very demonstrative. I was not stupid or uneducated or whatever. So I think the leader really wanted to make sure that they can make me feel less, make me feel inferior, condition me like that, so that when I finally could be initiated, it was, they had finally had enough control over my personality. And I think that's really what it was about.
There were some spiritual moments that you had over the years. And I know that in my early days in financial plannings, as a financial planner, there were some unscrupulous advisors that would teach me like how to use charts and graphs with people as sales techniques to show people stuff that would deeply influence my argument in a way that looked completely scientific. And I learned later was complete BS. Was absolutely complete BS.
Yeah.
You had similar things with Jaime. He showed you the blue pearl, I remember. And I know you've got several of these, but if we can just talk about this one thing, and then later on you find out what the blue pearl really is, which is really sad.
You know, Joe, I didn't find out. Now, here's the thing that was just so disgusting about the whole journey is I go along, you know, for 20 some odd years, we all did, right? And then a lot of circumstances, which you can get out of the book of why I left. And when I left, I just wanted to not look back. I'm done, you know. I did not find out all of those things until I was being interviewed for the film 10 years later. So it was when this all started to unravel, the real truth. And when I started to write this book is when I found out what this son of a bitch was doing. He was a total fraud from the beginning, a fraud. The 4 techniques, he was never a disciple of Maharaji's. He lied about, he told stories of his relationship with his master. You know, he never had a master. He's a liar and a con, right? And so he did these parlor tricks. Remember you've seen stories of the turn of the century, last century, where they would have these soothsayers. Yes. And they would come in, you know, and they'd have seances.
I was just talking about smart people. Cornelius Vanderbilt, like the dude that built the Vanderbilt fortune, got sucked into these. Got totally sucked into these. Right.
Exactly. You know, they'd make the table rise and they'd make the bells ring and all of that stuff. And you totally, you know, I say in the book, when you go to Disneyland, you're willing to forego your disbelief. You know it's fake, but you're there, you're having fun, you want to have, you know, you want to go for the ride. So you're willing to forego that. But what if you don't know it's fake? And what if everybody in the room, all your best friends and your family and the person that you admire the most is in on it, right? It's really weird. So that particular Blue Pearl incident was, you know, it was originally the 4 techniques. And then there's a guru by the name of Muktananda. Muktananda he was called the Shakti Guru. So Jaime read about Muktananda and read about what Shakti was. And apparently that's when the guru passes his energy to the disciple by touching their forehead. And you'll see that in the film, you know, in the forest where he's doing this thing on this girl. Well, he started to do that. And once the Shakti scam was happening, after, you know, in the beginning, he was doing it in the public satsang room, but it wasn't really working so well. So he started doing it privately because people weren't getting the, oh my God, you know, I'm seeing the light. They weren't getting that. So he took it in the other room privately, and that's where he would have a person kneel down in front of them, close their eyes, he'd do his little finger on their forehead, and then he would use a flashlight to flash on their eyelids to make them think that they're seeing the light of God, right? And so they would come out of the satsang or the Shakti room, some of them crying like they had seen the light, you know. This was all a scam. So for me, Muktananda had talked about the Blue Pearl. And the Blue Pearl was very special because he would describe the soul. When you see the soul is like in the form of blue light. So for me, he just used a blue light. And Joe, I didn't find this out for 15 years. You know, 10 years after I left.
There's just so much. I mean, like with Bernie Madoff, and you go through a lot of these big figures in history, all through history, and these people that follow these people, and the waves of disappointment. As you're leaving the cult, I just feel this huge sense of just disappointment, that this whole thing that you had been searching for, from childhood for a warmer family through Catholicism and the saints and wanting to be a saint, to finally feeling like you've got it, to believing that you got it, and finding out it was a flashlight and more is just, and the stories that we tell about people getting ripped off. I mean, it's the same. It's just this huge disappointment.
Yeah. There were experiences I was an initiate, so, and I did have some really profound experiences, which I talk about in the film. I talk about it in the film, but also in the book, and I describe pretty much in depth what the knowing session was. And once you were initiated, then it was really your meditation practice. And this is where, in the beginning, Joe, it was all about the meditation. And it had nothing to do with him. And this is what happens. There's a feedback loop between a narcissist and his followers. And in the beginning, when I was writing this book, I entitled it Duped. Because I was hearing and researching all of this and realizing, we were duped, right? But then as I started going through the process and the catharsis of writing, I realized, we were duped, we were lied to and all of that. But it really was more about the followers, because with a narcissist, with a pathological narcissist, there's a feedback loop between the followers and the leader. And so the leader will figure out what you want, and by hook or by crook, they will give it to you, whether it's fake or not. And then in return, they become like, oh my God, you fulfilled my dreams. How can I thank you? How can I compliment you? How can I adore you for doing this? Right? So that's the feedback loop. So the more you do that, the more they get fed. And the more they get fed, the more the parlor tricks and the more games, because they have to feed that pathology in them. So that's the feedback loop. So I realized it's not the leader as much as it is the followers that make the leader. And that's where it becomes dangerous. When you look at Adolf Hitler, Hitler could have never done what he did without the followers. He could have never done. One man or one leader cannot do it. It is the followers that do the bidding of the leader.
And that's what I found fascinating, was that you write that you found out later there were some followers that didn't have any of these existential experiences that other people had, and yet they said they did, because you didn't want to be the idiot who was left out. Like, if everybody else is feeling something, I got to pretend I do too.
Exactly.
And the preying on the pressure. You're right. It's not the one person. It's the community.
Right.
Which, if you look going back to Bernie Madoff, I mean, if all your friends are trusting Madoff, and these are smart people, these are college professors, these are brilliant people, I should trust this person too.
Yeah, exactly. And that is where it's a sort of a self-feeding trap. And then you start to see yourself making possibly unethical decisions. There's a great, I don't know if you've seen this, but oh my God, you've got to see this. On Netflix, you've got to. On Netflix, there's it's a documentary, and it's called The Push. Have you seen it?
I have not. No.
Dude, you've got to see this. Okay, so the filmmaker, and it's no mystery, he tells you from the beginning what he's doing, right? And he takes and sets up this elaborate situation where he sets up a job interview, and he puts out, and these are just regular old people, good people, nice, wonderful people. They would never do anything, right? and they come for this job interview, and he sets up a situation where he leads them down a set of circumstances that finally at the end gets them to push a perfect stranger off a building to their death.
Oh,
right? And this is true. And so when you see this, you're watching this going, okay, under the circumstances, okay, I might, yeah, okay, I would go that far. And he just takes you one step after the other until he puts you in a position where you have to make a decision. And it is worth seeing. Because if you think you're just a great, I'm a person, I would never do those I would never do that unless you put in the right situation.
Yeah. Well, I have to tell you, I love you going between your story and the clinical definitions, because you dive into narcissists and how they work, and you keep going back and forth, and you go into historical figures and current culture, and it's this wild tale you weave, Radhia. The book is called The Followers, Holy Hell, and the Disciples of Narcissistic Leaders: How My Years in a Notorious Cult Parallel Today's Cultural Mania. And I'm imagining it's available everywhere.
Well, it's available on Amazon. It's also available on Audible in my voice.
Oh, yeah.
So, who knows the sarcasm better than I do? And, it's you can go to my website, which is Radhia, spell it right, Radhia, Gleis, Gleis.com. And you can get it off my website. You can get it at Barnes & Noble and on Amazon. It's also, I've got right now a special. You can get the ebook, the Kindle, for free. So that is cool. And I'm doing a special. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I need reviews. So if you get it for free, I appreciate you reading it, but please give me a review, or at least stars, because you know how Amazon works,
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's how they work. So I need those reviews. So it's for free for the next month on ebook, on Kindle, and go for it and give me a review.
That's awesome. And you know what? We're going to link to it two places. Number one, on our show notes page at stackingbenjamins.com. And
I'll send you that link then.
That's great.
Link. Yeah.
Yep. And if people sign up for our newsletter, the 201, we're going to have all kinds of deep dives into some of the cons in history as well that go along with it. Radhia, thanks so much for sharing your story. I think this helps so many people, because we never know, right? You don't know.
No,
and then reading your book, you're able to start seeing the signs and hopefully save yourself a lot of anguish. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks, Joe, for having me. I really appreciate it. I wasn't sure where this was going on your kind of show, but I'm really glad. I'm delighted to talk to you.